Hi everyone, Matt Calloway again with University of Wyoming Women's Soccer. Today we're going to talk about just some generally accepted coaching guidelines. We're going to run through what's called the coach's toolkit, and then we're going to give some general technical things to look for when you're talking about dribbling, passing, receiving, finishing, and even goalkeeping towards the end. So I'm going to share screen and we will get rolling. Boom. All right. So as we talked about, just some general coaching guidelines, we'll roll through coach's toolkit first. So as we talk about the coach's toolkit, there's really four big kind of components of that. There's a fifth one that we'll go into during one of them, but I kind of feel like it's a subset. So first one's going to be coach the individual. That's you and the player, or a staff member and the player. Coach the group. That's obviously you and the group, right? So it doesn't have to be the whole team, but a lot of time if you're focusing solely on attacking for that, let's say for instance you're playing an offense defense, and you're focusing on the attack, then that would be the group, right? We're not really talking too much about the defense. Big one for me, kind of the favorite, the golden child, if you will, is conditions to promote learning. So these are just various conditions you put in your training session to achieve coaching points. And then the freeze method. Okay, so we'll roll through all of those. So first one, we're talking about coaching the individual. Okay, first things first, we're talking about during the flow. So during the flow basically means we're coaching over top of what's happening, right? So the game's going on, the activity's going on, the practice, anything that we're doing is going on. And we're just giving information to a select individual over top of that without stopping, without calling attention to anything, really just trying to communicate. During the flow is my favorite outside of that, conditions to promote learning. I think it's very, very useful both for the individual and the group. So when we're talking about individual, though, let's talk about one big key, timing. So when we're coaching the individual, we want to make sure that that player is not being distracted from the actual game itself, right? So some general rules of thumb are, let's try not to give coaching right before that player receives the ball, right? Or when they're in possession of the ball. So if they're dribbling, let's try to refrain from giving that coaching advice. If they're about to receive a pass, let's try to refrain from giving that coaching advice. Basically, we want them to still be able to influence the game, right? So we can't really give our coaching points when they're about to influence the game. Another thing in that, make sure it's not like a running narrative, right? So for everything, we're really focusing on getting the attention, getting the coaching point in, giving some positive feedback, and then letting them get on with it, right? So that's what we're really focusing on in the flow. In the flow needs to be really, really quick, okay? Another time we're coaching the individual is more one-on-one time. So think, hey, we're rolling through a technical warm-up. This one player is still not getting it technically. Maybe their passing technique is all wrong, right? We're going to pull them to the side then, coach the individual in that moment, then let them go back and practice what we had just given them advice on. Another time to do it 1v1, let's say you're playing a small-sided game and that player is off, right? Like they've been subbed off or their team's waiting to go on. Very good time to coach the individual in that moment, okay? And then remember, cookie method, I put it back in here. I know we talked about it the other day or in one of the previous videos. Positive, coaching point, positive. Okay? Or if you're in a hurry, positive, coaching point. Okay? Got to make sure that there's some positive whenever we're talking to players as well, because if not, then anytime we're opening our mouths, players are hearing negative, then they're going to get down. We're talking about lowering confidence. We're talking about handling mistakes properly, so on and so forth. So it's very important that we're giving them some positive information in those moments. Then point number 4, again, when you're coaching the individual, it can be technical in nature, or it can even be tactical. So technical, again, trying to coach the proper technique, whether that's passing, receiving, dribbling, finishing, what have you, anything in those moments, right? Tactical is more kind of within your own philosophy, within the game, more positioning related, more, hey, in this moment, can we look to find a penetrating pass instead of a pass that keeps possession for us, so on and so forth. Runs, etc. So that is kind of the tactical nature of coaching the individual. Good. So now when we get into the group, right? So we're getting into the group. We're talking more than one player. Maybe it's a team if you've divided up into 3 teams, what have you, but just again, more than one person, right? We're talking about adding in a line now. So like a midfield line, defensive line, forward line, or a combination of any of those 3, right? So during the flow, very similar to what we're talking about with the individual, we're doing it as the play is happening, okay? So we're talking about, hey, how are we attacking as a team? How are we defending as a team? How are we doing this? Again, in these moments that the game is still going on, okay? So we're talking about 1 or more lines there in that during the flow still. As we move forward, so natural stoppages, this is like the little subset that I was talking about. For natural stoppages, this is any time that the ball would be considered out of play during a match. So ball goes out of bounds, goal gets scored, injuries, fouls, etc. Okay. And again, natural stoppages means ball's not moving, right? So we're kind of giving ourselves a little mini freeze, if you will, in this moment. I like it more for the group than the individual. Again, personally, I think if you're going to coach the individual, I think you can do that during the flow really well, right? Sometimes with the group, if it's a big picture issue, again, talking about attacking defensive philosophies, talking about how to attack in a moment or how to defend. Like if the team is just looking to keep possession and you want them to try and find some penetrating passes, natural stoppage, great time to try to, get that done, okay? For the group, more often than not, it's going to be tactical in nature, right? So more often than not, we're going to go tactical. Again, teams looking to possess when you want them to try to find penetrating passes, or you want them to try to break lines in the other team by dribbling, shooting, passing, etc. Defensively, they're flying all over the place, pressing, and you want them to just relax, get numbers behind the ball, retain a shape, and get some balance, right? So when they're really doing something that is not what you're trying to get out of them in that moment. Okay, so that's what we're going to look like tactically. So technically, we can do coaching the group again. Think about technical warm-ups, think about stuff like that. Again, we're talking passing lines, we're talking dribbling lines, finishing lines, something of that nature. If they're not getting the proper technique, coach the group, right? If the majority of your group is not getting it, we can stop, we can go technical, right? We can bring them all together, make sure that the technique is right. Okay, one of the worst things we can do is not focus on good technique when we're talking about the fundamentals. Again, dribbling, passing, receiving, finishing for those players, right? It's never going to be a bad thing to be a more technically adept soccer player. Okay, so let's make sure we're hammering home technique, technique, technique. Okay, so we'll move through here. My favorite, again, conditions to promote learning. So this is various scenarios, situations, conditions that you can put into your activities for a training session that'll basically promote what you would want to say in a coaching point almost naturally. Okay, so it's very, very effective in my opinion because it forces the players to look at various visual cues, notice differences, notice imbalances, and try to exploit those either attacking, defensively. Okay, so some common conditions: field size and dimensions, again, width, right, height of the field, you know, is it rectangular, is it, I mean, diamond shaped, hexagon, octagon? Are there 3 goals? Are we playing a 3-goal game? Are there channels? So on and so forth, right? So really good example, if you want to focus on your team switching the point of the attack, okay, that field is going to be wider than it is long, right? And you can even drop channels, right? Even channels along the length of the field to have yourself 3 zones that you can play into. Okay, and you're saying, hey, before we score, we need to have players in all of the zones represented, right? Or we need to connect a pass in at least 2 of the zones, so on and so forth. Okay, big one for me is just making sure you're having players in all of those zones because that's more natural and lends itself back to the game. Numbers is also another one. If you're trying to focus on attacking quickly, right, whether it's a counterattack or recovering quickly, maybe we're going up numbers, down numbers on the defense, vice versa. Scoring system, I think, is a big one. For me, the one thing that we often do as coaches is reward teams disproportionately for keeping possession versus scoring goals. Okay, so what I mean by that is it's fine if you want to give teams points for keeping passes, like, hey, 5 passes is a point, da 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 da. But we can't value that more than we value breaking down the other team or scoring a goal. Okay, so for instance, if you're doing a small-sided possession activity, maybe we're offering a point for every 5 consecutive passes, but we're also offering 3 points if we can dribble through the end of the grid, okay? Or if we can connect a pass into like an end zone, if you will, right? So that way we're still valuing breaking down the other team and scoring a goal over just keeping possession of the ball, right? Because the whole point of soccer is to score, okay? The whole point of scoring is we have to break down the other team either by dribbling, passing, or shooting through them, right? So let's make sure that we're rewarding our team in training sessions with stuff that makes sense to that overall big picture, okay? So talking about the scoring system in that moment, we have to value the goal above all else, right? So the goal can be scoring in the big goal, dribbling to break a line, anything that breaks down the other team. Okay. Another reward system, not necessarily scoring, is offering set pieces. So you're playing again, small-sided, team A scores. All right, well, since team A scored, they also get a corner kick or they also get a direct set piece, so on and so forth. This is really, really good if your team needs to work on either attacking or defending set pieces, right? So if you find that your team is struggling with defending corners, well, hey, why not make them face a corner every time they also give up a goal, right? They can be used to reward or penalize teams. So if you want to say, hey, like, you've got to connect a pass in 2 zones, you didn't do that, the other team gets a free kick, right? That's another useful condition. So one condition that is very popular that I did not put on here is this one. So touch restrictions. I am not a fan of touch restrictions. The big reason is because it takes decision making out of the hands of your players. Okay. So if you're constantly saying, hey, we're going to play one touch, or 2 touch, 2 touch, 2 touch, right? Well, then your players never really learn the correct situations to play in that amount of touches. So if you're constantly asking them to play in 1 touch no matter what, it's not going to register like, hey, this is actually a time that I should play in 1 touch, or this is actually a time where I need to dribble and get into space. It's not just going to magically happen because that's what the situation calls for. We have to train it, okay? So that's one reason I'm not a fan of touch restriction. The other one is just my personal philosophy. I like to encourage dribbling. I like to encourage taking players on. And when you limit touches, you obviously limit the opportunities for that. So not a big fan of touch restriction. If it's something that you really like, it's something that works for you, go for it. Never going to tell you not to do something. I'm just saying it's not one of my favorites. I like some of the others, as far as, hey, point for 5 consecutive passes, but you also are getting 3 points if you score, okay? All right, now moving into freeze method. So freeze method is now becoming the last resort. Big reason are player attention spans and long-windedness of coaches. So a lot of times in freezes, we actually talk way longer than we think. As a matter of fact, if you go and do any coaching courses where they're trying to evaluate you, they will literally sit there and time your freeze, right? So big believer in this is the United States Soccer Federation, where they'll start their watch and you better get done very quickly because the longer you go, the harsher you're going to be graded, okay? Last resort, almost never technical, more often than not tactical, and you're trying to address the whole team in a freeze, right? You're trying to address all of your lines, okay? So when we talked about group, it was really a combination of 2 lines, right? Could be 3 lines, could be like 4 players within 3 lines. Freeze is we're trying to hit like 8 players, right? Or we're trying to hit all 3 lines. It's really, really big picture stuff, which is why a lot of the times it's going to be tactical. It's going to be like, hey, how do we penetrate in this moment? How do we just keep possession? Is it worth it to try to penetrate in this moment rather than just turn and keep possession, right? Looking at big visual and tactical cues as to why that is the case, right? So for instance, just an example, if one of your players is trying to penetrate on the dribble, but the visual cue is, hey, there's 4 defenders here that you still have to beat, and if we swing the ball and play around, we are wide open, then that's a visual cue for us to retain possession, put our foot on it, play negative, and then try to find a penetrating pass somewhere else, right? So those are the kind of things that you're looking for in a freeze, okay? One exception, as we talked about earlier in coaching the group, if there is a technical warm-up or a small-sided activity that the group just does not understand. They're not doing it correctly. They're not doing what you want them to do. Freeze it, address it, and then get back going, right? One of the worst things we can do is just let something go, 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 go. It's not what you want, not what you want, not what you want, not what you want. And then we never really address it. Make sure you get in there, make sure that you address it. But again, be considerate of how long it takes. Okay, so that's big stuff from Coach's Toolkit. Again, just to summarize, conditions are going to be your best friends, in my opinion. Okay, and then coaching within the flow for these two aspects are something that I really enjoy. I think it's very easy. I think it helps practice move quickly and makes it less choppy. But if you have to get in there and stop things, get in there and stop things. Okay, so now we'll just roll through some common guidelines. We're going to talk about dribbling, passing, receiving, finishing. So your big four technically for field players, and then threw in some goalkeeping at the end. Okay, so for dribbling, okay, big thing here, use the correct foot. Okay, use the correct foot. If pressure is coming from my right side, I need the ball on my left foot. Okay, foot away from pressure, right? Gotta make sure that we're hammering that home because it makes sense in the big picture, right? A lot of players are gonna fight it because they don't want to dribble on their weaker foot. But if they're dribbling on their strong foot all the time, okay, and in situations where they're not supposed to, they're gonna get the ball taken away, okay? Hammer this one, hammer this one, hammer this one. It's one of the biggest flaws in dribbling that I see, okay, is not using the proper foot to create space. Using the correct surface. So we can use our laces, right, toe down. We're using kind of the outside portion of our laces to push the ball into space, okay? We can use the sole of our foot just as a little bit of control, rolling over. But for about 90% of the dribbling, we're gonna wanna use this method here, okay? Try to get your players away from using the insides of their foot to dribble, because when you're trying to go at speed, it's very clunky, it's not balanced, and you can't really shift your weight easily if you're using the inside of your foot, okay? Again, bottom of the foot, very specifically talking like sole rolls, that sort of thing. But 90% of the time, we're in that wheelhouse, okay? Change of speed, change of direction, okay? Big one when we talk about 1v1s. So 1v1s definitely have to hammer home. Change your speed, change your direction. You don't even have to do a move a lot of times. But if you have an effective change of speed and change of direction, you will be successful, okay? Make sure that we're pushing the ball again with the proper surface when we're changing speeds, okay? And when we're changing that direction. This is a big one here. So correct surface, change of speed, correct foot. We're talking about protecting the ball, right? We're talking about making sure that we're keeping the ball away from the defender, setting them up, right? And then we move into that to beat the defender, okay? Within this, okay, we can add in a little bit of deception. So a little bit of creativity, a little bit of flair, if you will, right? Just to make sure that we're really trying to unbalance that defender and set them up, okay? So this is where we really promote that creativity, right? Big thing that we need to promote that creativity is vision. So when we're talking about dribbling, once your players become comfortable with the ball, it's very important that they stop looking at the ball when they dribble, okay? Need to try to force them to play with their head up, because if you're constantly looking down, you have poor vision, and you can't see pressure, so you can't make sure the ball's on the proper foot, right? Have to make sure that they're playing with their head up, okay? And then ultimately in the end, try to maintain that balance, trying to make sure that the weight is on the balls of our feet and we can shift fairly easily, right? Because when we talk about change of speed, change of direction, balance and that agility is very, very important, okay? So as we roll through here, roll into passing, okay? Passing, passing, passing. Number one thing, use both feet. So just like dribbling, there are going to be situations where it is more beneficial to you to use your weaker foot than your stronger foot. When players are not comfortable with that is when you see turnovers that can be easily avoided if we take time to practice, okay? Have to get them using their weaker foot. Have to, okay? Even the best players in the world have a good weak foot, right? Messi can do amazing things with his left foot, but he's pretty dang good right-footed too, okay? Have to make sure that we're doing that. Okay, then technique, always gonna hammer technique, always, 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 okay? So heel down, toe up. What I mean by that is we're making sort of a 30-degree angle, right, with the ground, okay, where our heel is the bottom part and then our toes are leading out as that, I don't know, vector, whatever you want to call it, okay? But we're using that as kind of our surface to play the ball. So that's going to be our instep, right? Heel down, toe up, okay? Toe down, laces, we're talking about driving the ball. So that same angle that we made with heel down, toe up, we're going to reverse it, and we're going to have the toe down so we can drive the ball through with our laces, okay? And then we're going to talk about a prep touch. So that prep touch, we want to get that ball out in front of us a little bit, right? So that it's a natural swinging motion for our leg when we're playing, okay? So a lot of people like to link this to putt-putt or putting in golf. Very, very similar, right? If you're too far away when you try to putt, it's going to go off the toe end of your club, right? Or your putter. If you're too close, it's going to go off the heel end, right? So even think about like a driver, for instance, okay? You want to make sure that you're hitting that sweet spot of the driver. Same exact thing when you're passing. We're trying to hit that sweet spot, right? And we're trying to have a good pendulum, right? Or good motion through the ball, okay? And you want to follow through, right, with your kicking foot into the direction that you're passing, okay? So we have to have a good follow through. You don't want to get to the ball and just stop dead, right? We follow through, and then that momentum helps us continue into the game, right? With like our next step if we're running, for instance, okay? Direction, very, very important. Lead your teammate into a useful area, okay? So this can be playing the ball into space, right? If we're playing our teammate into useful space, that's a good thing. This can be playing the ball to our teammate's feet as well, okay? It has to be useful, right? We have to make sure that we're setting our teammate up for success and we're passing the ball to them so that they can take their first touch into the direction they want to go, all right? It's very important. Make sure that we're leading our teammates into positive areas and useful areas, okay? Talking about the pace or the weight of the pass, right? Obviously, that's going to vary based on the distance. You want to make sure that we get the ball there in time for our teammate to take a first touch without being under immediate pressure, okay? That's like a general rule of thumb. If there's already pressure there, well, that's when we talk about direction, okay? Taking the ball and putting it away from the defender. So if the defender's on my teammate's right side, I want to play to my teammate's left side, right? Make sure that we're making that very clear. Play the ball away from the defender, similarly to dribbling, okay? So feet versus space, a lot of it is based on what the receiver is showing you. If the receiver is standing still and really kind of just giving you a target, if you will, play it into feet. If that receiver is opening up, right, giving you a channel to play the ball into space every time, okay? Make sure that we're giving them what they want based on visual cues, okay? And then the last thing, when we talk about passing into a run, right, a lot of times we don't want to have a straight pass go with a straight run, okay? We want more angled with straight or angled with angled, right? So that passing angle is very important as well, okay? Has to be perpendicular, cannot be parallel, right? So we don't want parallel passes, we want perpendicular between the pass and the run, okay? Boom, as we go into receiving. So talked about it again, use the correct foot, right? Broken record. Foot away from pressure. So in the example earlier, defender's on my right side, I need that ball to my left foot and I need to adjust to make sure that I can receive the ball and have my body between the defender and the ball, okay? Proper technique, so balls on the ground. We're talking about heel down, toe up again, similar to passing, right? So balls on the ground, we're gonna go heel down, toe up. You can also use the sole of your foot to play. I know you see that a lot in professional soccer. Again, it's not like a foot up and stomping on the ball. It's more like I've lifted my toe up and I'm just gonna use the studs to control the ball there. So again, your heel is still down and your toe is still up in that moment as well, okay? First touch. So let's make sure that it's into useful space. Let's make sure that it's also relative to pressure, okay? So if pressure is super tight, then my first touch needs to be super tight unless I can get my first touch all the way beyond them and get on to the end of it, okay? If pressure is loose, now I have a little bit more room of error with that first touch as far as tightness to my body, right? Good rule, it's a good first touch as long as the player can get a second, okay? If the player can't get a second touch or that first touch doesn't go to a teammate, it's not useful, right? Then it wasn't a good first touch. But even if that first touch is 10 yards away from the player, if they can get a second one or that touch goes to a useful area for a teammate, it was a good first touch, right? A lot of people are going to be negative in this moment. Oh, my first touch is terrible. It's not. As long as you get a second or it goes to useful space for a teammate or a teammate, good first touch, okay? Then we talk about a proper surface, okay? So instep, laces, thighs, chest. So this is going to be more for balls in the air. So if we're receiving balls out of the air, proper surfaces, right? Instep, okay? Laces, thigh, chest, and we want to cushion the ball in and get it to the ground as quickly as possible, okay? So if that ball is coming in and it goes off my chest and I pop it back up for a 50-50 ball, that's not what we want, okay? Big thing when you talk about receiving out of the air is we have to get it and put it into a useful spot for myself as quickly as possible, okay? So I need to get that ball out of the air onto the ground quickly as possible, okay? Then body shape here, okay? Big thing with body shape, try to receive across your body if at all possible, okay? So that means if that ball is coming from my left, I'm gonna try to receive with my right foot so that I open up as much space as possible, okay? If I'm constantly receiving with my left foot and going back into the space where the ball just came from, I'm cutting myself off to a good portion of the field, okay? Second thing with body shape, make sure that we're open, make sure that we're facing the majority of the field, okay? This is kind of on the passer as well, right? But if we're the receiver, we can do work to make sure that we can still receive the ball facing forward and facing the majority of the field, even if that pass is slightly behind us, okay? Big thing you don't want to get caught doing is facing the sideline, facing the corner of the field, facing your own goal, right? You want to make sure that you have as many options as possible when you receive, okay? Then scan the field, okay? Scan the field, scan the field, scan the field. When you're about to receive the ball, you should be checking, right? Your shoulders, you should be picking your head up, seeing what's happening so that you are better prepared to take a first touch and do a useful area or to pass the ball to a teammate that's opening up, okay? Got to scan the field. In my opinion, you should take 3 looks, okay? First look is when your teammate's preparing to play you the ball. Second look's going to be as it's traveling. And then if there's time to take a third look after you've received it, do it, okay? But you got to get at least those first 2 looks in so that way if there's pressure coming quickly, you know, hey, I got to play this first time, or my first touch needs to beat this pressure, so on and so forth, right? Very, very important that we're teaching our players to play with their head up and scan the field. All right, everyone's favorite, finishing, okay? Use both feet. Again, there's going to be times where you need to use your weaker foot to finish in a game, so it needs to be trained, okay? Proper technique, again, heel down, toe up. If we're talking about our instep, we're talking about more placement, all right? Toe down, similar to what we talked about with the passing. Again, same sort of angles as the passing for laces and or power, okay? Then prep touch again, okay? The only thing that really distinguishes finishing from passing is that you're basically going to goal, right? So finishing, obviously, you're going to goal. Passing, you're going to a teammate. But it has a lot of the same properties, okay? Prep touch. Think about golf swing again. We're trying to hit that sweet spot, so that ball needs to be out of our feet in order to hit that sweet spot, okay? If it's too close, we're not going to get power. If it's too far away, not going to get enough power, okay? Last thing there with that proper technique, make sure that we're following through again, okay? So a lot of us have heard, hey, follow through so that you land on your shooting foot or your finishing foot. That's fine. You don't necessarily have to do that. If you watch a lot of top level soccer, they don't do that an awful lot. A lot of it is they just follow through and they still stay on their plant foot, okay? But that's not necessarily a bad thing, okay? If you want to make sure your kids are following through, fine. Follow through, make sure you land on your shooting foot. But if they don't have a problem with following through, then I wouldn't really bring that up too much. Eye on the ball is massive for this as well, okay? Direction. Most of the time it's going to be towards corners, okay? Very, very few goals go in if you hit the middle of the goal, right where the goalkeeper should be standing, right? Trying to finish towards the corners, okay? Pace of it's going to determine where you're at on the field. So inside the box, maybe you don't need as much pace, but if there's a ton of people around, there's a ton of pressure, it's in really tight, maybe we do need to just fire at home with a little bit of pace, okay? It's very, very situational as far as pace or power is concerned, okay? Last thing here is going to be maintain that balance again. So if you're off balance when you're shooting, you're not going to have good contact. You're not going to be able to hit a solid surface, right? We're not going to be able to generate much power, okay? One thing I forgot, so back into this prep touch. Talked about maintaining kind of that golf swing mentality, but if we can take that prep touch towards goal, or at least at a forward angle towards goal, we increase our chances of being able to hit the ball on frame with good power, okay? If we're taking that touch to the sideline, or even negatively, we go down percentage-wise as far as like being able to connect with power and put the ball on frame, okay? Last thing I'll say, kind of not really technical, right? But with regards to finishing, is try to encourage an aggressive and positive mentality, okay? You don't need a ton of space to get a shot off. You need just enough space for a ball to get through, okay? And you need to shoot if you're gonna score. So we have to encourage and enhance that aggressive nature and that positive mindset when it comes to finishing, okay? Can't have players that are scared to shoot the ball. All right, and then the last piece we'll roll through here, goalkeeping. Okay, so number one coaching advice, tidbit, whatever you want to call it, with goalkeeping is get goalkeepers set before any type of action. So action, they're receiving a pass back from a teammate, they're coming out to get a cross, they're making a save, they're doing anything at all. Make sure that they're getting set. So set, weight up on the balls of our feet, on our toes, leaning forward, okay, ready to spring into action. Hands, we want them in front of our body, okay? So a good set position, we're thinking hands, right? So weight up on our toes, we're bent forward, hands and arms are at about a 90-degree angle off of our shoulders. So that elbow is like a 90 or above really angle, right? That we're looking at. We want our hands in front of our body in those moments, okay? Second thing, get those hands to the ball, right? Number two thing that you really need to coach, get your hands to the ball. Okay, get your hands to the ball, hands to the ball, hands to the ball. All right. Get those hands directly behind the ball when you're trying to make a save, and make sure that they're rounded to cushion the ball. I always like to say, make your hands make the shape of the ball so that they cushion the soccer ball in and there's a little bit of give, okay? So when we talk about this as well, get hands to the ball, what's very important? Footwork, okay? Your feet are gonna get you to those places that allow you to get your hands behind the ball, all right? So relating footwork back here to getting set, we're up on our toes, we're using either shuffle steps or cross steps to get to the ball. So cross steps, basically what that is like a karaoke without the behind movement, okay? So a cross step is like a only in front karaoke, if you will, right? So if I'm going right with a cross step, my left foot is just going in front of my right foot the whole way. It's never going behind it, right? So that is a cross step, and that is something to help you cover ground in the goal. Now, not to say that you can never cross behind, but it's very, very select instances. And a lot of times it only has to do with like recovering. So your goalkeeper made a save, they're trying to get back up, get to a new position. Fine, if we need to cross behind to do it, let's do it, right? They're trying to fight to get their weight back forward, okay? Body behind hands. So again, we're talking about moving to stay behind the ball. So again, footwork, right? Got to make sure that we have good footwork if we're going to be goalkeepers as well. Okay, it is as important, if not more important than being able to catch, is being able to actually get to the ball, right? Make sure that we're moving, trying to keep our body behind the ball at all times until we get down to this last point, right? Diving not realistic to keep your body behind the ball all the time when you dive. But for catching, for anything within like our range where we don't have to go to ground, get that body behind the ball. Catching, general concepts, if it's going to be a low ball below the belly button, okay, we're going to get our pinkies together and we're going to build a ramp into our chest to cushion that ball in, okay? If it's above our belly button, now we're going thumbs and index fingers, basically make a window to catch the ball. They don't have to touch your thumbs and index fingers, okay? You want to make sure that you're covering as much of the ball as possible when we're talking about those overhand catches, okay? For low ones, we do need those pinkies to touch all the way up because it limits the area between our arms for the ball to sneak through, okay? But for catching high balls, again, above your belly button, you don't necessarily have to do that, right? You just have to make sure that we're covering surface area and the hole between your hands is smaller than the soccer ball, okay? Then as we roll into diving, very important, get your players to step into the dive where it's applicable, okay? Sometimes the ball is going to be hit hard and tight to where they have to dive and they can't step into it. That's fine. When it's outside of that range, step into the dive, okay? So again, talking about weight forward on the balls of our feet, same thing when we talk about diving, okay? It's a lateral movement or slightly forward. It's not a giant step forward, okay? If you take a giant step forward, you end up with your weight off balance and you end up leaning back and you're not gonna cover as much ground when you dive because your weight's taking you backwards. If you go lateral and it's not a super exaggerated step, okay, and you can keep that weight balanced, you're gonna extend the range, okay? So step into it, but make sure that it's lateral, slightly forward, maybe, not giant, because you want to keep the weight on the balls of your feet, okay? As soon as the weight goes back, we lose distance, right? Balls of the feet, balls of the feet, balls of the feet, okay? And then again, get the hands to the ball. The bottom hand is going to be more important for about 80% of the diving saves that your goalkeepers make, okay? So 80%, basically what I'm talking about is any diving save where the ball is hit below your head, right, below head height, that bottom hand is more important because it can actually reach further than the other hand. So bottom hand, if the ball's hit to my right side, my right hand is my bottom hand, okay? 80% of the time, that's the most important one. It's also gonna help you get a hand behind the ball so that we can deflect it out away from the goal if we can't catch it, okay? For those other 20%, the balls that are hit above your head, right? Your top hand is gonna be the one that is more important. So what I mean by more important is try to get both hands to the ball, but if the goalkeeper makes a decision that they can only go with one, that is the hand we use, right? So that's what I'm meaning by more important. Okay, so that's pretty much goalkeeping in a nutshell. Again, as we talk about technical applications for dribbling, passing, receiving, finishing, big number one point, if you take nothing else, encourage using both feet, okay? And encourage using the correct foot in the correct moment, right? Encourage that, encourage that, encourage that, please. That is probably the number one detriment to you soccer players is we don't encourage using both feet and using the proper foot at the proper time, okay? Go ahead, stop share. So that is basically it. I mean, that's going to be your coach's toolkit there. Again, using those conditions to promote learning is going to be your number one tool. In my opinion, coaching in the flow is really number two. and then freeze, last resort, way down on the list. And then just some general technical things for dribbling, passing, receiving, finishing, and goalkeeping. I put my email on the first slide, so if you have questions about this or any other video, don't hesitate, right? Reach out. I would love to help you. I'd love to get in contact with you. You know, I'm an open book, so any questions you have or anything you want to just talk about, let's do it, right? I feel like it's my job to help grow the game in this state. So anything that I need to do that, I am more than willing to do. Okay? Talk to you guys later.